In this video, I'm going to be making blueberry oatmeal muffins. We'll start off here. I'm going to measure out a cup of oats. What we're going to do is we're going to soak them in milk while we do the rest of the mixing up the other stuff, get them to absorb some of that milk. What we'd like is to get it to soak for about 20 minutes. Now the recipe calls for a cup of milk and a cup of oats, but since I'm using frozen blueberries instead of fresh, it says to cut the milk back by a quarter cup, so I'm just using 3/4 cups. Next up we got butter, and it calls for a half cup of butter. Melted butter, so I'm just going to chop it up, throw it in a glass measuring cup there, and pop it in the microwave. And I just like to melt it in there, do like 30-second increments, see how it does. Just want to barely melt it. There we go. Fresh out of the microwave. Now with most muffins and biscuits, you mix up the dry ingredients in one bowl and the wet ingredients in another bowl, and then you mix the two together. And if you're folding if you're putting anything in like blueberries or nuts or whatever, then you'll fold that in at the end after you've got it all mixed. And one of the key things you want to do is not over mix. And it does different things depending on what you're making, but like biscuits, if you over mix them, you get hockey pucks. They're pretty tough. And muffins, they get kind of tough too, or they don't rise, or so you just want to barely mix it is the thing, till it's just barely mixed. So we got flour, baking powder, baking soda, cinnamon, and some salt there. And of course, you should never measure over your bowl, but I do that quite often, because if I mess with that salt, then it could kind of ruin it, but I'm pretty good at not missing it. I'm going to go ahead and preheat the oven here, 425. Next, I'm going to mix up the wet ingredients. And as far as this goes for the wet and dry ingredients, sugar is considered a wet ingredient because you want it to dissolve into the wet ingredients, so it's usually where it goes. In some recipes they'll have you like cream the butter and sugar together, in which case you're going to whip it a little more than normal. This is just going to be stirring it up and getting the sugar dissolved. So we got butter and brown sugar and vanilla and an egg. Now the recipe does call for honey, but I don't have any honey today, but I do have brown sugar, so I'm just substituting that. So we'll get that mixed up. There we go. Next, I'm going to measure out 1 cup of blueberries, frozen. I'm using frozen. And if you're doing frozen, don't thaw them, just leave them frozen. Pick out any bad ones. Alright, stir up my oats and milk there. Get my favorite utensil, the spatula spoon. Now we're going to mix the wet into the dry. Like I said, you don't want to overmix it. So you just want to mix this until you have no more dry flour, basically. It's always a good idea to use your spoon and go down to the bottom and pull up that, because otherwise you can get pockets of dry flour down there. Okay, we're looking good now. Pretty thick batter. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to do what's called fold. We're going to fold in the oats and milk and then the blueberries. So again, we're just going to just barely mix and try to mix it only until they're spread throughout the batter. Not very much. So what happens when you mix it is the flour, the gluten in the flour starts to develop, and then they get chewy and hard and dense. Alright, got our pans out. I got 2 6-cup instead of 1 12. Of course, if you had 2 12s, you'd have to make 2 batches. And I like to use the muffin liner. You could just grease it, spray it with oil, or grease it up with some butter. But I like to use the little paper cups. And then we just divide the batter up evenly between the 12, or as even as you can. And mostly it's just fill them up for this recipe. Oftentimes with cupcakes, you only fill them like halfway or something, or some other recipes, but this one it's pretty much just fill it up. Alright, now into our preheated oven, preheated to 425. And what we're going to do is we're going to cook these at 425 for 5 minutes, just to get a little rise and setup on the top of the muffin. Then, after the 5 minutes, we're going to turn the temperature down to 350. Then we're going to go for about 13 minutes and check and see if they're done then. Alright. The way you check muffins and cupcakes is with a toothpick. You just poke it in there, and if it comes out still kind of doughy, then it's not done yet. So I'm going to give it another couple minutes. Alright. Check them out. They're looking pretty good. See some brown on there. Alright, nice and clean this time. So it should be cooked all the way through. So we're going to take these out, set them on a rack. I like to put them on a rack on the top of the stove because I think they cool a little faster. What you want to do is let these sit for about 5 minutes, and then we can take them out of the muffin pan and just let them cool on the racks. So at this point the pan is still hot, but the muffins aren't too bad. You can at least get them off onto the rack. You don't want to take them out too soon, because if they're not set yet, then you can just mess them up. So it's good just to wait a little bit and get them out. And if you let them sit in the pan too long, they can kind of get hard. But so, and then just let these sit on the rack and cool, if you can. You might not be able to wait and just have to cut in. Pretty good. Nice blueberries in there. Got 12 nice muffins there. Alright, well, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.